At time of making this video, my channel banner bears the slogan, "Exposing the Thought Police," since 2016. I've always considered that to be a metaphor. Until now. Now, apparently, the police in my country have taken it upon themselves to check up on your thoughts to make sure that you're not having any of which they disapprove. Don't believe me? Well, keep watching and I'll tell you about a man who was questioned by police for liking a tweet. So, the guy's name is Harry Miller. He's the boss of his own company and a former policeman himself. He also raises money for people in the poorer parts of Nepal. Hardly what you would call a hardened criminal, but that didn't stop Humberside police from phoning him at his place of work and giving him the third degree for over half an hour. They even went so far as to threaten to try and get him fired by telling his boss about his social media activity of which they disapproved. Fortunately for Harry, as I said, he is the boss of his company, so they weren't able to carry out that threat. And what had he done to draw the ire of Humberside police in such a way? Well, let's have him tell you in his own words. Got a call from director. Yeah, his job title is chairman, not director, by the way, if you were wondering how someone else can be the director when he's the boss. Got a call from director, saying cops wanting to speak to me. It had sense not to give out my number, but said it'd pass on details. I rang. So he rang them in good faith, it seems. Bear that in mind going forward. Spoke to PC from Humberside, introduces himself as representing the LGBTQ community. Why is there such a thing as an LGBT community representative in the police force? Why do they get special treatment? Spoke to PC from Humberside, introduces himself as representing the LGBTQ community on a report of hate speech by me. Hate speech doesn't exist. There are things like threats, incitement to and direct calls for violence, sure, but they have their own laws prohibiting them, and rightly so. Everything else is just speech. They'd found me via my company, had been all over the website and decided if I employed trans people at all, it was not a safe place for them and work should know. How so? Why shouldn't his company be safe for trans people? Well, Humberside police can't answer obviously, so I'll have to answer for them. They seem to think that because Harry believes that trans women, i.e. male to female trans people, are men, that somehow makes it unsafe for them to be around him. Because there's nothing more dangerous than a different opinion, right? I think it's worth pointing out at this point, that no matter how much like a woman, how convincing a male to female trans person looks on the outside, they will still always be technically male on the inside. Cop said he was in possession of 30 tweets by me. I asked if any contained criminal material. He said, no. Then that should have been the end of the conversation. In fact, it should really have meant that the conversation never happened in the first place. But, happen it did, and it continued thus. I asked if any came close to being criminal, and he read me a limerick. Honestly, a limerick. A cop read me a limerick over the phone. I said, I didn't write that. He said, but you liked it and promoted it. So what? Liking and retweeting things isn't a crime, no matter what they are. In fact, so what even if he did write it? There's nothing illegal in it anyway, so the police have no business getting involved. I asked why he was wasting his time on a non-crime. He said, it's not a crime, but it will be recorded as a hate incident. Why? Liking and retweeting a poem with the sentiments of which the police do not agree is a hate incident now, is it? Well, that's downright scary, isn't it? So I've added to a statistic, even though there is no crime, which brings me to my next point. The cop repeatedly called the complainant the victim. I asked how there could be a victim if, as it established, there was no crime. He said that's just how it works. Well, that's just not good enough, is it? Saying, that's just how it works in that situation is like a parent saying to their child that they may not do something or they have to do something, because I said so. It doesn't explain anything. It's not even an excuse, it's just a total brush off. My comment was that by framing the complainant as victim, this made me, by default, criminal. I asked him to desist from using it. Good. Quite right too. No crime, no victim. This is where it gets incredibly sinister. gets. I'd say it already was. But yes, it is about to get even more so. The cop told me that he needed to speak with me because, even though I'd committed no crime whatsoever, he needed, and I quote, to check my thinking. Seriously. Honestly. You see. Let me just read that bit for you again. Even though I'd committed no crime whatsoever, he needed, and I quote, to check my thinking. Holy fucking shit, man. Remember what I was saying about the thought police not being a metaphor anymore. This is where we are now in my country. The police will want to speak with you personally to check your thinking if you like and retweet the wrong tweet. One that goes against social justice ideology. This is what happens when social justice ideology gets into an organization. It corrupts it, and when that organization is a police force, as here, we get situations like this, whereupon people are given the third degree for wrongthink by an institution that wields state power. Finally, he lectured me. Said, sometimes, a woman's brain grows a man's body in the womb and that is what transgender is. No. That is not what transgender is. That would be a rather bizarre form of intersex. What he's thinking of is gender dysphoria, where the person feels as though they were born the wrong sex, but a guy with gender dysphoria doesn't actually have a woman's brain, he just wants to be a woman, that's all. You can imagine my response. Lastly, he told me that I needed to watch my words more carefully or I was at risk of being sacked by the company for hate speech. That's a threat. That is the Humberside police, threatening a man who, they acknowledge, has committed no crime. Honesty, they sound like the mafia there. That's a pretty controversial poem you've liked and retweeted there, Mr. Miller. It'd be a shame if your boss found out about it. You might get fired, and we wouldn't want that, would we? You know, if this had been me, I'd like to think that I'd have been threatening to make a complaint to the Independent Office for Police Conduct long before this point. He still could go to them, I suppose. I wonder if he'd have a case.